Hello, Pamela.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I just had a fabulous revelation related to our hangout,
Well,
which
please share.
it was. I just realized, and I don't know how the heck I hadn't realized this before, but Mars Curiosity, since it has a radiothermal generator,
And a laser.
and a laser, will probably only last about 2 Earth years, maybe a little bit longer. But Opportunity has no end date because it's solar powered. So in theory, Opie could outlive Curiosity.
But won't the RTG last like a decade, like the
I just
Voyagers?
Googled it and they were expecting it to last two Earth years.
That's weird.
Yeah. It
Because
may
I
be the
remember,
amount it may be the amount of power required to rove is sufficiently great that it will
right,
become more and more stationary.
right. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's weird. I mean, Opportunity. I mean, apart from all of its problems, is still going. So,
Yeah.
hey, this is Astronomy Cast. In case you're
Hi.
wondering what on earth it was that you just stumbled into, we're going to do a live recording of our weekly Astronomy Cast podcast. This week we're going to talk about rovers. And so that's Dr. Pamela Gay. I'm Fraser Cain, and we are interacting live with our audience. So if you're using the Q&A app, which I hope you are, which is just wherever you're watching this video, it should say you can interact with the audience. Go ahead and do that. And I'm going to say hello to Thomas Traniker and Michael Meyer and Helga Bjerkhaug and Rick Schwartz and Tony Lynch and Guido Bibra and Corey Brait and Tom Van Scoter and Jim Meeker, Nancy Graziano, Giselle Sabarin, and Richard Strassel. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this live episode of Astronomy Cast. And Pamela's great. We saw you on Friday with the Weekly Space Hangout as well. So
I'm gonna try and do that when I'm not off traveling. This Friday, I have to admit, I'm gonna be probably on a train on my way from Goddard to the Baltimore airport on Friday. So I'll miss this week, but I'm gonna try and, as travel allows, join you as I can.
We had Professor Sarah Seeger from MIT, who's just sort of one of the greatest planet hunting scientists sort of in the field, and it was just an absolute treat to talk to her. So it was great. It was great to have you sort of help explain some of the stuff, and she explained some of the other stuff. It was great. It felt a bit like a mini Astronomy Cast. It was awesome.
Cloning the long-haired women.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, well, let's do this thing. Now, normally we stick around and answer questions for a while, but I know you've got some stuff that you've got to deal with. So we're going to sort of record the episode, and then, if there's a couple of like really good questions, but I think we'll probably wrap it up once we're done. So
yeah,
apologize in advance to everybody, but this is how it sometimes goes. And for those who didn't notice, I've put stuff in my background now. Yay. But there's going to be more stuff coming. We're going to put some pictures up. We're going to get better lighting in here, trying to make a proper studio out of this. So, all right. Are you ready-ish to press record?
Once I refine the window.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Rediscover your windowness.
There it is. I found it. It was hiding behind Chrome.
Okay. Say when.
I am pressing record.
I am also pressing record.
We are recording. Wow,
Yay.
that was loud. Sorry, Preston. Sorry, eardrums of Preston.
No, it wakes him up, puts him into the zone. Astronomy Cast, episode 385, Rovers on the Run. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Fraser?
I am doing awesome. So are there any notes this week? One, you should totally listen to the Weekly Space Hangout if you aren't already. We're into the new season. The first episode that we did was with Alan Stern from Pluto New Horizons. which was just, it was awesome. And we also, and then last week we talked to Professor Sarah Seeger from MIT and talked about hunting for planets and lots of other great space news. And Pamela, you were there. So if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the Weekly Space Hangout in addition to Astronomy Cast, because now the feeds have been separated. And in fact, if you are listening to it on iTunes, etc., if you could go in and give it a review, that would be awesome, because it actually hasn't gotten very many reviews, and so people can't really find it. So that would be really helpful.
And as another note, mostly because I'm wearing it. For those of you who are listening, this is fairly useless, but I'm about to stand up and show off the shirt I'm wearing. I am Team Ceres. I am very sad that everyone's like, Pluto used to be a planet, and no one remembers Ceres used to be a planet. Well, over at astrogear.spreadshirt.com, we have all of your Team Pluto and Team Ceres needs covered. You can go pick up a Planet Pluto Classic shirt, a Ceres, the other former planet shirt, and a bunch of other stuff.
That's awesome.
So I'm a big fan of parodies. Go check out what I do when I am tired and can't sleep. So I'm going to show off my shirt for those looking.
That is awesome. Ceres, the other former planet. All right, well, let's get on with the show. So taking pictures of distant worlds is great and all, but the best science happens with boots on the ground, or in this case, wheels. This week, we'll talk all about robotic rovers and the places they rove. All right. So I think, everyone is so familiar with Curiosity and Opportunity and Spirit, but these aren't the only rovers, and these aren't the first rovers. This concept of roving on another planet has been going around for quite a while. So can you sort of go back into the history files and talk about, like, what was the first rover concept that was implemented?
The first successful one was Lunokhod, which was one of the Russian series of rovers. And even though it launched well before we were born, like long ago, in 1970, which to some people may not be long ago, but for me it is. This little rover held the distance record up until the Mars exploration rovers overcame it. And that's just kind of amazing to think about. So yeah, the Soviets basically mastered the fly-by-wire concept, went up to the moon. They had 2 separate rovers. There were a couple of others that were built. One didn't make it. The other one didn't fly. But they certainly did their job. Now, amusingly, America or the United States of America, to be accurate, in its desire to make its own point about roving the moon, calls the dune buggies the astronauts drove rovers, and really they're dune buggies with E-string piano wires for tires. But they're really dune buggies, not rovers. So yeah, the first really cool robotic get it done was the Soviet series.
Right. And so just for anyone who maybe is, doesn't have a picture of the rover in front of them, what kind of a structure, what do these things look like?
Electronic bugs is how my brain always thinks of them. In the case of the Lunokhod one, actually this awesome little tiny Lego model of it. It has these 8 little wheels on axes that the axes could each independently tilt. So instead of having to have a tread system, it just had a whole series of wheels back to back to back to deal with the crazy terrain. And then on top of this is basically a saucepan with a lid that tilts on a hinge. It's this little conical area with a plate for a hat and a lid that flips backwards and has solar panels on the inside of the lid. It's really kind of adorable in a I'm a robot bug kind of way.
Right. I sort of think of it like a ladybug. If a ladybug's back would, or like a turtle, right? Imagine a turtle
Yeah.
with its shell would sort of flip back open, and then that's where the solar panel was, and it would sort of, and
It's
it would
just
sort of,
mutant with 8 legs.
right, and it would rove around. But the big distinction with these rovers and the ones that we're all familiar with is that they were fly by wire, right? There was an operator in the Soviet Union who was piloting this thing.
Right. And this is part of why they were able to get the distance record and hold it for so long. Is the moon's not that far away. We're looking at a little over a second one direction light travel time. And so, yeah, the operator would happily sit in his nice, safe control room in the Soviet Union, look at the information coming down from the spacecraft. And basically, it's just like driving a really laggy character in your favorite online video game. So think about what it's like to play with lag. And in this case, you're dodging rocks instead of sword fights.
Right. So you're not going to win any death matches, but it's possible to actually rove this rover around. Yeah, and it went, what's the final distance? 39 kilometers. Which
is pretty impressive for a robot.
Yeah. That's crazy. So what came next?
Well, so like I said, we had America making pretend that our astronaut-driven rovers with 4 wheels and an engine count as rovers. I mock them with a smile. I mock them with a smile.
Yeah. Imagine Mark Watney driving around the Curiosity rover to make it go.
Yes. Yes, except less power.
Yeah.
So then we had the Soviets did then attempt to do the Mars thing with both fly-by-wire, which is a bit harder when your planet is tens of minutes away, as well as automated commands. It was scheduled for release in 1973, but it launched but never got there. So there was that. And then pretty much everyone ignored Mars until the late 90s. It's really weird. There's this gap from early 70s to late 90s when not a lot of planetary exploration went on. And then finally in the late 90s, we had the Mars Sojourner rover and Pathfinder. And they literally blazed the way with their technological tests to allow us to get Opie and Spirit up.
Well, I mean, what do they call it? The Mars Goblin? What is the thing that eats all of the spacecraft that try to go to Mars? People watching this, listening know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, there is a sort of a mythological creature that destroys and eats all of the spacecraft that try to go to Mars. And there was this horrible run back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s where spacecraft after spacecraft, mostly the Soviet ones, all just died in horrible ways. But the Soviet Mars 2 and 3 landers had this great little teeny tiny rover that was going to be on it, and it was going to rove across the surface of Mars. And it was like a children's toy. It had these skis on the side of it, and then the skis would sort of flip over, and then it would sort of push itself forward a little bit, and then the skis would flip over, and it would sort of flop its way across the Martian landscape. And unfortunately, they never made it, and so they never got that information. But it's strange that they got rid of the concept of the roving and went to this weird ski design, but it never got.
They went back. So Mars rover with Pathfinder and Sojourner brought the cute back to space exploration.
Is that what's really important to you? Is that
no, it's not, but it does make trying to communicate it to the public fun. And there is something to be said about doing science that makes you violently giggle. And there is violent giggling involved in Pathfinder and Sojourner, because this is the spacecraft that they covered in bouncy balls, dropped, and then let it just kind of bounce all the heck over the place. And then it kind of righted itself and Pathfinder spread out its little platforms and started acquiring data, and little tiny Sojourner, which is like the size of a kid's Tonka truck, went rolling away. And they continued the silly by like naming rocks Yogi Bear and things like that. But they did this fabulous tech check. They innovated the whole idea of bouncing your way into a safe landing and got us set with, yes, we now actually do know how to safely explore the surface of Mars. And without bouncy little Pathfinder and happy little Sojourner, we wouldn't have Opie and Spirit.
Yeah, the design for Opportunity and Spirit just followed that exact same platform. This idea of using the big airbag system to land, and this is part of the big problem that we're going to face in the coming decades of trying to send larger and larger payloads to Mars. Right? Is that the thickness of the atmosphere on Mars is thick enough to cause anything to be destroyed, but thin enough. Have I cut off? Okay, thin enough that it doesn't really provide you any good aerobraking, and so you either smash on the surface of Mars or you get incinerated by the atmosphere, and there's no happy medium like we have here on Earth. You can't just fly down the way you can, and so these landing concepts, figured out by Pathfinder and then followed up by Spirit and Opportunity, are terrific and a really great solution to this middle problem. Like, let it bounce on a big balloon across the surface.
And it went to this fabulous little 6-legged design that got kept and introduced the whole idea of a nice flat little beetle that is covered in solar panels. And then with Mars Exploration Rover program, they added that long neck with the 2 eyes at the top that gives stereoscopic vision. There was a bit of an arm on Sojourner. There's one heck of an arm on Spirit and Opportunity. And the whole idea of having a suite of cameras, including all of those wheel navigation cameras, that has proven to be so fundamentally important to how the rovers have safely, until Spirit got stuck in the dirt, have been able to safely traverse the red planet.
Well, let's talk a bit about the control system, because we mentioned, because the Lunokhod rover was so close to Earth on the moon, it really could be a video game that you could be driving around the lunar surface. But in the case of Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity and Sojourner, you've got this huge delay, 20 minutes more, to communicate between Earth and Mars. So how do they deal with that?
Well, Sojourner, which was a technological test bed, it was very much a take a whole bunch of photos, look at the photos, and then program the mission. You will do this, you will do this, you will do this. It's a lot like student robotics competitions where you're given your field of play, and then based on that piece of paper that tells you what your field of play is going to look like, you program your robot accordingly. With Spirit and Opportunity, they've updated the programming a lot over time, and it's gotten very much to the point of they give it an idea of thou shalt go this far, make sure that you don't hit this thing, so be aware you're going to need to hang a left and go around it this direction. But it's more like the kind of directions I'd give you. So head to the store, go this way, but watch out, there's construction along this route, so you want to hang a left, go around this tree. And with Spirit and Opportunity, it got to the point where the navigation cameras on the wheels were looking out for rocks. It was able to do a certain amount of intelligence to go, okay, I need to avoid this thing I wasn't specifically told how to handle, and I can figure out how to handle that specific thing on my own.
Right. And I guess the problem is that because all the computing has to be done on the rover itself, it's not like you can do that processing, the self-driving back on Earth and send the information back and forth. The lag is just too long. You've got to have that intelligence on the actual rover.
And video processing is one of those things where we are as humans capable of looking at a surface and telling fairly reasonably whether or not it's painted with speckles or covered with small rocks. We have that capacity. Now, trying to program a rover to tell the difference between sand that is mottled with different colors and a red surface covered in small black pebbles. You have to be able to do that. You have to be able to get each of those tires to successfully go, oh, hey, I've got an obstacle over here. Entire spacecraft, you need to pay attention. There's a lot of machine learning that also goes into all of this.
I just did a quick search. So the Spirit and Opportunity had 128 megs of RAM on board and 256 megs of flash memory. Curiosity has 256 megs of RAM and 2 gigabytes of flash memory. So they're not super fast computing. So we talked about we talked about Spirit and Opportunity, and of course, we've done shows about just those rovers themselves. Spirit, we lost. Opportunity is still going and going, but NASA took all the things that it learned and then built Curiosity, the Mars Science Laboratory.
And Curiosity doesn't just build on the Mars exploration rovers and Pathfinder. It also builds on things that we learned with the Mariners before in terms, and the Vikings before, especially with the Vikings, where we had issues of, if you try this thing, you will get inconclusive chemical results. Therefore, do not try that exact same thing again. So there's a lot of thought that went into, how do we build the ovens? How do we build the everything, basically? This is a spacecraft that has to know how to poop. When you hear people talking about everything poops, well, that happens to include Mars Curiosity, because it will scoop up a sample, run a variety of tests on the sample. And in the past, we've had spacecraft that scooped up a sample and then they had the sample. But Curiosity is hopefully going to be doing a whole bunch of samples over a long, long time. You don't want to be carrying around all that dirt forever. So it had to know how to empty out its ovens, empty out its sample containers. If that gets stuck, we can't keep doing samples. So that would be a really bad thing. So we had experience from all these different spacecraft that all got combined into this one stereoscopic viewing, 6-legged,
nuclear powered.
And that nuclear powered is actually highly controversial. So one of the things, like, I knew it was radio powered because I've heard a lot of the people who work in the outer solar system complaining about how it's such a waste of the nuclear isotopes to send it to the inner planets. And I was like, okay, but you need a lot of power to run the ovens and everything. But one of the things that, if you read the NASA websites, a lot of them are talking about, well, this should last for 14 years. Spirit and Opportunity were the little Energizer bunnies until Spirit got stuck, but Opportunity is still going, and we're going on a decade-ish of Opportunity roving. So 14 years sounds pretty good. But when you start reading, like, there's a critical review of it over at MIT, and when you read the critical technology reviews, you start seeing people expressing concern of, it's spec'd to last a minimum of 1 Mars year, which is 2 Earth years, and that might be all we get. And so I'm hoping the 14 years is more true, but there is that potential that, whether it be 14 or 2, because it's a radiothermal generator, which does at some point use up all of the half-lives of those isotopes, Opportunity might still be continuing to rove on its lack of all wheels working, while Curiosity sits a frozen lump on the Martian surface.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen estimates that it, could last 5-6 years. The RTG will last 10, 12, 15 years, but apparently at the end of like 10 years, the amount of energy is going to be down to like 100 watts. So it's going to have a hard time generating enough energy to do the things that it did what, at the beginning when it had its full power. And so it, might not be able to move anymore. And so it's going to turn into more of a
stationary
a
science.
stationary, yeah, like say the polar lander, things like that. The Phoenix lander.
Well, you can still do good science. Spirit sure did a lot of good science until it froze. But yeah, it's so much more powerful to be able to go, I have a rock from here and I have a rock from here. And
yeah,
we want all the rocks, all of the rocks.
Now, there is another rover that most people forget about that has been launched since and is still operating, I think.
Chang'e 3?
Yeah, on the moon.
Yeah, I think it actually has powered down by now. It was only supposed to last for 3 months. It went up a couple of years ago, but it didn't get any news attention. So it landed on December 14th, 2013. It was a couple days after my birthday, which is why I have firm memories of when it went up. It got there, it behaved, it did its job, and then it eventually powered down, but it got almost no fanfare. It was very sad. It worked.
Yeah,
they got it right the first try.
Yeah, there was great photographs of the lunar surface. It took some great pictures of itself.
Yeah.
Emily Lakdawalla did great coverage of what was happening with Chang'e 3. So as of March 2015, the rover was immobile and its instruments are degrading, but it's still communicating with Earth radio stations.
And Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter did a Christmas Day photo of it back in 2013. So you can actually see exactly where it is in context in the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter images.
Yeah. So that's the sort of the suite of rovers that have been sent so far. But of course, we also like to talk a bit about the future. So what kinds of plans have been made? What kinds of mission concepts are in the works for future? Now I'm going to expand it, because I think we should include some of the more interesting concepts as well. Hoppers, airplanes, helicopters, worms, all kinds of crazy concepts, sailboats.
Yeah, that's not a rover, but okay. So the next rovers that we're likely to see are going to come from one of two places. The one place that we might see it next is Chandrayaan-2, which is an Indian mission, which is, well, it's actually a joint mission between India and Russia. And it's nominally slated for some time this year. I'm not sure where they stand in that. I haven't had an update on that one recently, but so there's that on the horizon. And the cool thing about this mission is it's really starting to showcase what a powerhouse India is turning into when it comes to space exploration. Yeah. So there's that. Now, the other thing that might be happening on the same time scale. So we're getting ready to totally coat the moon in robots. That's really the only way to describe it. So you have Chandrayaan-2 planned. And then the other thing is there are a number of teams planning to try and get their little robotic critters to the moon in competition for the Google Lunar X Prize. And what I love is some of these teams are actually sharing berths on different rockets. So they're going to land pretty much side by side on the moon and then take off like a bat out of hell to try and win the X Prize in competition with one another. And the Google Lunar X Prize, for those of you that don't know, is a multi-million-dollar competition to land something successfully on the moon, traverse 500 meters however you feel like this. So you could burrow and do a worm-like journey. You could rove, roll, hop, flit. You could fire yourself up. come down somewhere else. And in my head, I have this fantasy of the little Sony dancing robot, like basically doing the moonwalk or something. How awesome would it be to have a robot moonwalk itself 500 meters across?
I'm just imagining some crazy race out of the 1960s with different rovers, ranging across and also doing all kinds of dirty tricks and putting down oil slicks and to try and stop each other.
Yeah. One of those Route 66 movie type races.
Yeah. Cannonball Run across the moon.
Exactly.
Yeah. But hopefully within the next couple of years, a private group will have delivered a rover to the surface of the moon, and it will have roved a significant distance across the surface of the moon, which is awesome, unprecedented.
And this competition, while the initial goal is that 500 meters, there are all sorts of bonus rounds, I guess, if you're a video gamer is a good way to put it, with challenges to do a variety of other things. And if you'd like to learn more about this, we do have a Hangout series that I host for the Google Lunar X Prize, where once a month we sit down and talk with the men, women, and often students behind these different teams all over the world. So check that out, Google Lunar X Prize on YouTube. They have 2 channels. One has the Hangouts. The other one has everything else. We're trying to get them merged, but as everyone out there who's ever worked with Google Hangouts knows, it's really easy to accidentally end up with like 40 channels.
Right. And of course, if we're doing disclaimers, I of course work for HeroX, which is an offshoot of the X Prize. And so we're looking to let anybody do an X Prize. So, but we still would have talked about the Lunar X Prize even if we weren't in some way affiliated with them. So let's move on. So the other one I think is important to talk about is the ExoMars rover, right? This is one
and Mars 2020. You really have
Mars
to
2020.
discuss.
Yeah.
So there's interesting politics here. I don't know the full story because it's often hard to get the full story. But there were plans to do major exploration of Mars. Europeans were like, hey, NASA, want to come along? And NASA was like, no, we're not going to Mars, not going to Mars. And then Curiosity was so successful. Like,
darned awesome.
Yeah, exactly. That like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there were announcements for a Mars 2020 rover. And everyone who'd been like, well, we need to stop going to Mars and redistribute our efforts to the outer solar system was like, no, go back to Mars, go back to Mars. And so there was a lot of the Europeans going, but wait, we asked you to be part of our ExoMars thing, and now you're telling us you're doing your own mission? So, yeah, NASA has a habit of doing that to ESA just because Congress, it's not NASA's fault. It's Congress playing with what priorities are.
Yeah. You can have the money. You can't have the money. We need to go to the moon. We need to go to Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have people who get elected every 6 years, 4 years, whatever the particular person's life cycle is, dictating priorities, and NASA has to follow those priorities, it's often difficult to work and play well with others. So the history behind ExoMars and Mars 2020 is one of, well, it would have been nice if we had one awesome multinational plan. Instead, we're going to have 2 hopefully awesome rovers. But yeah, everything's still in the planning.
But some of the, part of the process, I mean, we're really starting to move towards, I guess, setting the groundwork for the human exploration of Mars. And so a lot of what these rovers are going to be doing is answering those next big questions. Is, with Curiosity, it's up to, were the conditions on Mars good for life in the past? And now, the goal is to kind of push that science a lot further now. I mean, it's going to be a copy of Curiosity, right? An upgraded version of Curiosity.
I'm not sure they'd want you to call it that. But what's cool is they have what's called the Pasteur instrument suite, which includes an organic molecular analyzer. So they're trying to figure out what is the specific chemistry we're seeing. There are more spectrometers designed for looking at chemical signatures in completely different kinds of ways. It's also carrying a ground-penetrating radar, which allows you to start looking at the density differences, which could mean ice differences or lack of ice differences beneath the surface. So there's a whole lot of awesome instrumentation on ExoMars that's planned. I don't know a lot about their site selection, but what's cool is we're starting to look for places that aren't just another crater. So they do have a short list of a couple of different valleys, a plain, Arum Dorsum, which I have to admit I don't know a lot about, but it is some sort of what looks like a river basin area. So we're looking at completely different kinds of landing sites for it. Now with Mars 2020, they're going even a step further, and they're looking for as degraded a landing site as they can find. And we're actually using CosmoQuest as one of the different places that is reviewing all of the images, trying to find an area that is crater free. So we're asking you to map the craters so that we know where not to land. So if you go participate in Mars Mappers at cosmoquest.org, you're helping us find some really nice degraded sand duney area where hopefully we'll be able to have the wind reveal just the right ancient organism signature. It's not going to reveal the organism, that will have been long dead, but the chemistry of the organism in that sand.
Well, I think we're starting to run out of time, so I just want to quickly run through some of the other concepts just that have been proposed, and we can wrap this up. So ideas of sending sailboats to Titan, right? Ideas of like jumping robots to Mars and to the moon. So instead of them necessarily rolling around the surface, they'd actually have ways of jumping, hop bots. There's ideas of aircraft, of either propeller driven or even jet aircraft that would fly around in the airs above Mars. Helicopter ideas for this.
Zeppelins.
Dirigibles on both Mars and Venus, which is actually an ideal place to send balloons.
And occasionally Saturn. You do hear Saturn talked about as well. Jupiter's a little bit radioactive.
And too hydrogen-y.
Yeah.
The other idea was, and then some concepts on rovers to be sent to Venus. So you could actually build, it'd be very difficult to try and keep that heat out, and your rovers would be on borrowed time, and it would all be about cooling. But in theory, you could have something rove around on the surface of Venus for a little while anyway, which would be great. So, and now when you hear about things like, what about Europa? What about Enceladus? What about Pluto? We need rovers on all the places, all the time. Get at it, NASA. Awesome. Well, thanks, Pamela.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Let us kill the recording. Uploadinate it.
Yep.
And then we will probably have to roll. Sorry to do that.
Sorry, everyone. I have much mammals in my house that are unhappy with reality at the moment and need attention.
Yeah, you've got a sick dog.
I have a very sick dog. Well, no, I don't have a very sick dog. I have a very ancient dog that is starting to run out of warranty.
Right, yeah.
So there's a difference between sick and parts are just wearing out.
Yeah.
So
still hopeful about bacon though. So
yeah. As long as the dog is like willing to contemplate lifting head and looking up and begging for bacon, we're good.
Yeah.
And still standing up to walk outside a couple times a day. So.
Okay, great. So why don't we wrap this up then? So thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you're looking for a place to go, you should, or some things to do, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you could go and give some feedback to both Astronomy Cast on like iTunes, give us a rating in the iTunes store, as well as the Weekly Space Hangout. We would really appreciate that. We really, especially we've got lots of 5-star reviews with Astronomy Cast, but very few reviews for the Weekly Space Hangout, and we could really use your help with that.
And a side note is, I've now had 3 different people randomly show up at my office when I wasn't there, asking how they can get involved and help out. Do not randomly show up at my office. So send us email. We are happy to have volunteers, but randomly showing up at my office tends to be confusing to everyone involved, and I'm often not there.
Yeah. But send an email.
Yeah, email is awesome. Starstrider at info at Astronomy Cast. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Pamela. We will see all of you Friday if you want to watch the Weekly Space Hangout, or next week.
Yes. Sounds great.